Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The morning sun gently caressed the clean windows of St. Richmond Academy, a renowned school in the city, attended by the children of the wealthiest families. In the courtyard, the students laughed and called out to each other joyfully, dressed in impeccable uniforms, white shirts, blue ties, shiny shoes. In the middle of them, 12-year-old Alicia Johnson walked timidly, her worn bag on her back, clutching a decorated notebook in her hand. Her hair had been carefully braided by her mother the day before, and in her eyes shone a light of innocence and curiosity. It was her first year at this school. Her mother, a nurse in a public hospital, had gone without for months to give her this opportunity. She wanted her daughter to have access to a quality education, regardless of the color of her skin. But from the very first days, Alicia had understood that this school was not a welcoming place for a child like her. In her class, the looks were often harsh. Some students snickered because of her mismatched shoes or her accent. And above all, there was Mrs. Thompson, the head teacher. A woman in her 50s, with a stern face, who had been silently bullying Alicia since day one. "Perhaps you should go back to a school that's more suited to your level, Alicia," she had already said in a condescending tone. The other students had laughed. Alicia, for her part, had simply lowered her eyes. She wanted to learn, not fight. That morning, the science lesson began in tense silence. Ms. Thompson questioned the students one by one. When it was Alicia's turn, she stood up, intimidated but determined. "Photosynthesis is when plants use sunlight to make their food," she explained in a clear voice. A few students nodded. His answer was correct. But Mrs. Thompson frowned. "And where did you learn that?" "On the internet?" she asked sarcastically. "In the book, madam," Alicia replied timidly. "I doubt you understand what you're saying. You're just repeating without thinking." The class burst into laughter. Alicia felt her eyes sting, but she remained upright, clutching her notebook to her. She had learned this lesson by heart with her mother the night before. She wanted to do well. "Madam, that's exactly it. The plants." "Enough," the professor suddenly shouted. And, in a gesture as sudden as it was incomprehensible, Mrs. Thompson raised her hand and violently slapped Alicia. The sharp noise echoed through the classroom. There was complete silence. Alicia brought her hand to her burning cheek. Her eyes, filled with tears, looked up at her teacher. "For what?" she murmured in a trembling voice. But no answer came. Mrs. Thompson simply crossed her arms, her face closed, as if this gesture were justified. "Maybe this will teach you some respect," she said coldly. Alicia remained motionless, under the gaze of the other students. Then she picked up her notebook which had fallen on the floor and slowly went back to her seat. The rest of the class took place in a heavy silence. Even the most mocking students no longer dared to laugh. Some had seen a deep pain shining in her eyes, that of a child who had just understood that sometimes, the adult world could be cruel simply because of the color of your skin. What none of them knew yet was that this slap would change far more than just a classroom. Because this humiliated little girl wasn't just anyone. And the man who was going to come to defend her was going to shake the entire school system. The next morning, St. Richmond Academy no longer resembled the calm and respectable school it claimed to be. In front of the gates, parents were murmuring, students were whispering, and several journalists were already waiting with their cameras. A video had leaked overnight, secretly filmed by a student at the back of the classroom. It showed Mrs. Thompson violently slapping Alicia Johnson, a 12-year-old child, for no apparent reason. The scene was unbearable. The girl's face, her wounded gaze, and the silence of the others. It all set social media ablaze. In the light morning rain, Alicia's mother came running up. Monica Johnson, a nurse at the public hospital, was still wearing her work uniform. Her eyes swollen with fatigue and worry, she hugged her daughter tightly. "My God, Alicia, what have they done to you?" "I didn't do anything, Mom. She just slapped me," said the little girl in a trembling voice. Monica felt her throat tighten. She placed her hand on her daughter's still-marked cheek. "We'll sort this out, darling. I promise." The school principal arrived, visibly nervous. "Miss Johnson, please calm down. We are conducting an internal investigation. The incident is regrettable, but we must avoid a scandal." Monica sat up slowly. "The scandal?" "The scandal is that a teacher raised her hand to my daughter because she is black." The director looked away. A tense silence followed. At that moment, the sound of an engine caught everyone's attention. A black car with tinted windows stopped in front of the school. 2 men in suits got out, followed by a third. All eyes turned towards him. He was a tall man, in his 40s, with an upright posture and a gaze of rare intensity. His impeccable suit contrasted sharply with the cold anger emanating from him. He walked towards the courtyard, and one of the guards whispered to the headmistress, "That's Federal Judge Marcus Johnson." The director turned pale. "The Judge Johnson?" "Yes. Alicia's father." Silence fell in the courtyard. The teachers, parents, and students remained frozen. Ms. Thompson, urgently summoned by management, arrived in turn, looking self-assured, until her gaze met Marcus's. He advanced slowly, his voice calm but sharp. "Are you Mrs. Thompson?" "Yes, sir. But I don't understand." "I understand perfectly well." He took out a copy of the medical report and his phone. "You humiliated and hit a child." "My daughter." A murmur rippled through the meeting room. Mrs. Thompson wanted to justify herself. I had no bad intentions. That little girl was being disrespectful." Marcus cut her off abruptly. "You raised your hand to a child. And you dare to talk about intent?" His gaze darkened. "Do you know how many years I have dedicated to defending children who are victims of violence and racism? You dared to do to my daughter what so many others have suffered in silence. But me? I am not the father who remains silent." Monica, standing behind him, watched the scene, moved to tears. For the first time, she saw this man whom she had not seen for years, not as the stern judge of the newspapers, but as a father ready to do anything for his daughter. Mrs. Thompson tried again to defend herself. "I assure you I didn't know who she was." Marcus approached slowly, his tone icy. "You didn't need to know who she was to respect her. But now, the whole country will know who you are." Outside, journalists had already started filming. The parents, outraged, took Alicia's side. And while management panicked, Marcus Johnson made a simple gesture to his assistant. "Prepare the documents. We are filing a complaint." Alicia's face lit up with a slight smile when he took her in his arms. "I'm here now, my princess. No one will hurt you anymore." But he knew that this matter went far beyond a slap. She was about to become the symbol of a disturbing truth. Even in so-called exemplary schools, racism hides behind diplomas and polite smiles. 2 weeks had passed since the slap. The Alicia Johnson vs. Mrs. Thompson case had made headlines across the country. Newspapers spoke of a racist and disgraceful act, and television channels debated education, skin color, and power. In St. Richmond, the school hallways had fallen silent. The mocking laughter had vanished. Everyone knew that the teacher would have to answer for her actions in court. On the morning of the trial, the city's federal courthouse was packed to capacity. Citizens, journalists, parents of students, and even teachers had come to attend the hearing. In the front row, Alicia held her mother's hand. She wore a simple white dress, her braids falling over her shoulders. Her eyes were calm, but deep within them burned something new, strength. Mrs. Thompson entered, escorted by her lawyer. She seemed nervous, but tried to maintain a dignified air. When she saw Marcus Johnson sitting in the room, her face tightened. The man standing there was not just a respected federal judge, he was a wounded father, but also a symbol of justice for thousands of families who had experienced injustice. The presiding judge spoke. Ms. Thompson, you are accused of physical violence against a minor and aggravated racial discrimination. Do you admit to the facts? I admit I lost my temper. But I did not act out of racial hatred. It was an error of authority, not of color. A murmur rippled through the room. Marcus stood up slowly, asking to speak. Your Honor, I do not represent the law here, but a father. A father whose daughter was beaten simply because she did not fit this woman's image of the good student. This is not a question of cold-bloodedness. This is a question of contempt. His tone was calm, but each word fell like a stone. This slap was not given to an insolent child. It was given to a skin color, to a symbol that some still refuse to accept in places of knowledge. Mrs. Thompson looked away, her lips trembling. You humiliated a 12-year-old girl in front of her entire class. A child who just wanted to learn. A child who still believed that teachers were there to protect, not to hurt. The room remained silent. Alicia looked up at her father. Her fingers were gently squeezing her mother's hand. Marcus continued, speaking more quietly, but with restrained emotion. When my daughter came home that evening, she didn't talk to me about the pain. She asked me if she should apologize for existing. That's what your actions destroyed. A murmur of emotion rippled through the audience. The judge nodded slowly. The defense lawyer tried to salvage the situation. Ms. Thompson served education for 20 years. She was never racist. Perhaps we should consider the pressure, the stress. Marcus turned towards him. Stress does not excuse hatred. And 20 years of service in education does not give the right to humiliate a child. The judge struck his gavel. Silence in the room. After several hours of hearings, testimonies, and viewings of the video, the verdict was reached. Guilty of violence against a minor and racial discrimination. Ms. Thompson received a 2-year suspension, a temporary ban from teaching, and a fine to be paid to a foundation for abused children. But for many, the real judgment was not that of the court, it was that of society, which now saw her as the face of shame. Outside the courthouse, journalists crowded around Marcus and his family. A microphone was thrust towards him. Mr. Johnson, any final words to conclude this matter? He took Alicia's hand and looked at the cameras. My only message is this: never let anyone tell your child they are worth less because of their skin color. Education should uplift souls, not crush them. Then, casting a proud glance at his daughter. And to those who still doubt, remember, the truth always comes out in the end, even through the tears of a child. That evening, in the silence of their home, Alicia rested her head on her father's shoulder. Dad, do you think she'll ever understand what she's done? Marcus smiled sadly. Perhaps. But it's no longer your burden, my princess. You will grow up free. A few months had passed since the verdict. St. Richmond Academy, once a symbol of excellence, was now associated with a national scandal. Equality for Alicia, signs still occasionally fluttered in front of its gates, left by parents and associations who had come to protest. But for Alicia, life had changed in another way. From that day on, she no longer walked with her head down. The mockery had ceased, replaced by looks of admiration. Some classmates who used to laugh at his skin now came to apologize, awkwardly. But Alicia felt neither hatred nor triumph. Only a mixture of calm and precocious maturity. She had understood that sometimes, suffering becomes a silent strength. At home, life was slowly returning to normal. Marcus Johnson, despite his public role, had made a habit of spending more time with his daughter. In the evenings, he would help her with her homework, or tell her stories about the great men and women who had changed the world despite the pain. You see, my darling, he told her, what you have experienced should not define you. But what you do with this ordeal, yes. Alicia listened, fascinated. And little by little, an idea was born in her heart, to help other children like herself. A few weeks later, a major event was organized in the city, a national conference on egalitarian education and respect for children. Journalists, teachers, and even political figures were present. On stage, Marcus Johnson was scheduled to deliver an opening speech. But to everyone's surprise, he invited his daughter to speak in his place. Alicia stepped onto the stage, trembling but proud. Her voice, initially timid, gradually gained strength. "My name is Alicia Johnson. I am 12 years old. And I believe that no child should be afraid to go to school. School is where you learn to dream, not to be ashamed of who you are." A murmur rippled through the room. His simple words resonated more deeply than any political speech. That day, I cried. Not because I was slapped, but because I felt invisible. And I want no child to ever feel like that again. Never. The audience rose to applaud. Marcus, his eyes shining, looked at his daughter with a pride that no title, no position could have equaled. From that moment was born the Alicia Hope Foundation, created by Marcus in honor of his daughter. Its goal, to defend children who are victims of humiliation, racism, or injustice at school. Dozens of teachers participated, and several schools across the country adopted the program. The newspapers made it a symbol of change, the story of a little girl who had transformed pain into hope. Meanwhile, Mrs. Thompson, the former teacher, lived in seclusion. Deprived of education, she spent her days reflecting on what she had done. One day, she wrote a letter to Marcus and Alicia. "I am not seeking forgiveness, because I do not deserve it. But I want to say that your strength has opened my eyes. You have made me understand what I have refused to see all my life." Marcus read the letter, then gave it to Alicia. The little girl remained silent for a moment, then simply said, "I forgive her, Dad. Not for her sake. For my own." Marcus held her close. That day, he knew that his daughter was no longer just a victim, but a light. Years later, a young woman stepped onto the same stage, dressed in an elegant black dress, her braids now gracefully styled up. It was Alicia, a law graduate who became a civil rights lawyer. "When I was 12 years old, a teacher slapped me because she saw a difference in me. Today, this difference is my greatest strength." Applause erupted. In the crowd, a gray-haired man watched him with a moved smile, Marcus Johnson, his father, the one who had chosen to turn an injury into a fight. And for a moment, their eyes met, filled with pride, love, and peace. Because through the pain of an unjust slap, they had together written a lesson in humanity that the world would never forget. 20 years had passed since the day a teacher raised her hand to a 12-year-old girl. The city had changed, and so had the country. But something in Alicia Johnson's heart had never disappeared. That memory, that pain transformed into flame, had guided her all her life. Now she was Dr. Alicia Johnson, a lawyer, lecturer, and advocate for children's civil rights. His name resonated in universities, in schools, and even in the corridors of government. But that morning, she wasn't going to a courthouse. It was at St. Richmond Academy, the school where it all began. As she got out of her car, she stood motionless for a moment in front of the gates. The building was the same, but the atmosphere was different. Children's laughter rose up, joyful and free. A large sign now displayed. St. Richmond Academy, a school for all, without distinction. Alicia gave a small smile. The symbol was powerful, almost unreal. A young professor came to meet him. "Dr. Johnson. What a thrill to have you here. Your story has been taught to our students for years." Alicia nodded, moved. She entered the classroom. The very same one where, once, she had been humiliated. The parquet flooring had been changed, the walls repainted, but she still recognized the exact location of her table, near the window. For a moment, the past washed over her like a wave. Then she took a deep breath, and walked towards the students who were waiting for her. In front of her, about 30 children, of diverse origins, watched her with admiration. She placed her hands on the desk and said calmly, "A long time ago, in this same class, I learned a lesson. Not the one you find in books, but the one that life teaches. I learned that you can be belittled, hurt, be made to doubt yourself, but no one can take away your dignity." A respectful silence reigned in the room. Alicia looked at a little girl in the background, with dark skin and bright eyes. She smiled tenderly at her. You, my little one, never forget, you have the right to exist, to learn, to dream. No matter what the world says, you are enough. You always have been. A murmur of emotion rippled through the classroom. Alicia continued. I was sitting here, in your place. I was afraid. Today, I stand here so that you never have to be afraid again. The students applauded timidly at first, then enthusiastically. The professor, visibly moved, discreetly wiped away a tear. Upon exiting, Alicia paused for a moment in the corridor. On one wall, a list of honor displayed the names of famous alumni. His own name now appeared there, accompanied by a sentence. Alicia Johnson, for turning pain into hope. She remained for a moment contemplating these words. Then, raising her eyes towards the light in the corridor, she murmured to herself. You see, Dad, we kept our promise. A gentle autumn breeze entered through the open window, making the curtains rustle. Alicia left the school, her face calm. In front of the gates, children were playing, laughing without fear, without hatred. And in their laughter, she heard the echo of a better future, the one she had helped to build. Years later, in a documentary about his life story, he was asked, Dr. Johnson, what would you like to say to the little girl you once were? Alicia smiled gently, her eyes slightly moist. I would tell him, hold on. Because even a slap can become a seed. And that seed, if you nourish it with courage and faith, will grow a tree that will shelter the dreams of thousands of other children. The camera remained focused on her face. A serene, strong, and luminous face. The story of a woman who understood that one does not rebuild oneself by forgetting the pain, but by giving it meaning. And so, the humiliated little girl from St. Richmond had become the woman who taught the world about dignity, forgiveness, and justice.